Hi.
Let's take a look at the front pages, which are dominated by German Chancellor Angela Merkel suggesting that an alternative to the Irish backstop plan could be found, but within 30 days.
The Daily Mail features an optimistic headline, "Can we do it? Ja, wir kann." The paper describes the developments as a Brexit boost for Boris Johnson, who it says has immediately accepted Angela Merkel's challenge.
However, the Daily Mirror describes the Prime Minister as stunned in his reaction to the German Chancellor's demand that the UK must find a realistic alternative to the backstop. The Times predicts that France will adopt a harsher position than the German government. President Macron has warned a no-deal Brexit would be of Britain's own making, and a trade deal with the US would represent a historic vassalisation of the UK.
So it's going to be a story of 2 different days, 2 different leaders and very different approaches to our Prime Minister. Joining us now is the Mail's Andrew Pearce. We've also got Miranda Green from the Financial Times. Welcome. And also the French journalist, Nabila Ramdani. Welcome to all 3 of you.
Morning.
Let's come to you first. Macron is dealing with Boris Johnson's approach very differently then from Angela Merkel. Is that going to be a problem between Merkel and Macron? I mean, you know, she seems to be throwing him a lifeline, it seems.
Well, I think the first thing to say about these negotiations is that Boris Johnson has spent a career, built on anti-EU rhetoric and more recently on the promise of Brexit, while Emmanuel Macron is one of the most committed Europeans in French history. And
but he wants to be president of Europe, isn't he?
I remember that France is one of the founding fathers of the entire EU project, and post-war presidents, have taken, extremely seriously the fact that the membership to the EU is an absolute must.
So this is an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object, isn't it? I mean, they are polar opposites. Unlike Merkel, who was at least prepared to give a little bit yesterday, your president is going to be he's going to be like de Gaulle, Monsieur Non.
Well, he gave a very lengthy press conference yesterday ahead of Mr Johnson's visit, and he made it abundantly clear that UK demands to renegotiate Britain's exit from the EU was simply not an option, and I don't think he'll budge from that. Having said all that, Mr Macron is very much of an Anglophile. He speaks English perfectly. He has told me about his holidays and weekends away in Britain. He even had a great-grandfather who fought for the British in World War I, believe it or not.
So he likes us.
So he's a very pragmatic politician, and I don't think he'll be looking into humiliating or punishing the British, not least of all because we are so close geographically, the 2 countries are.
But he's not going to give an inch, is he?
I think he's the crux of the matter. It will boil down to the Irish backstop, and I can't see his view being far removed from Donald Tusk.
Andrew, what did you think about Merkel yesterday? Because watching the news, the immediate reaction on the networks was, "Oh, blimey, she's being cooperative. She's not exactly being submissive, but she's being helpful." And I was talking about it with Rennie here earlier, and we both felt our immediate reaction was, "Whoa, that's a suicide pass." She's basically said, "OK, you say you want to get this done. Over to you, Mr Johnson. You've got 30 days. Good luck."
People are talking about it as an olive branch. I'd call it more of an olive twig because, in 30 days, they've taken 2 years to try and sort out the Irish backstop and failed. What can you do in 4 weeks? Nothing.
But can I just ask you that? I mean, both of you then, why is it that the government continually insists on saying that there are alternatives available if they can't now produce them? Why keep saying that something is available when you can't on day one? We asked yesterday to a government minister, will it be ready? Then if it's available, will it be ready? They don't want to answer that question.
Well, they've talked about the same thing before, technology, trusted trader relationships, but all this has been rejected by the EU, and as far as I'm aware, they're just going to reheat it and repackage it. But what it's done, though, is given Boris great headlines on his first diplomatic outing. He's seen as having secured...
What do you think Boris really thought when What do you think Boris really thought when Merkel said that? Do you think actually inside he thought, "Oh, God, she's actually given me a deadline"?
Well, I think one of the stories of the last 3 years has been misinterpretation on both sides of this, unfortunately. And I think possibly the British press have been a bit too eager to see it as a concession when she was, being polite. I think what we'll get today is very much, we had Merkel as good cop and we'll have Macron as bad cop. These are the 2 countries at the heart of Europe. They have different diplomatic styles, these 2 leaders. But also, to answer your question, I think that also the Europeans have really misinterpreted Britain in that we are going to leave. And I don't think they really believed it, you know, and that's... So you've had us trying to interpret every move from the other side as a concession. We can reopen the withdrawal agreement. They're not going to reopen the agreement.
One of the games...
Also part of it's about a blame game, I'm afraid.
Yes, that's what I literally was about to ask that.
Yeah.
Do you think it is about who's going to eventually carry the can for no deal? Because Boris Johnson, when he said, you know, do or die, we're leaving, then he was like, 1 in a million chance we'll ever leave with no deal. You know, it was sort of within 24 hours he changed his sort of tack on it. Is it about who's going to be blamed now? We're not really looking at an actual deal. What we're looking at is who on day one of Brexit, when there's...
and Merkel can say, look, I gave them a last chance and they didn't take it. But I also know some of these EU leaders are pinning their hopes on the idea that in Parliament, Boris will be scuppered, brought down, and there'll be this unity government put in place. Ridiculous. They can't agree, the opponents of Brexit, on anything. They're more divided than the Brexiteers.
So they're not. So Europe is not going to move an inch, whatever Merkel has said, until they know what Boris's fate is.
Absolutely, that's my view.
Tactically pointless.
They're waiting until the House gets back in September.
They see whether he falls or stands.
If there's a confidence vote.
Yes, well, I think, you know, Mr Johnson is clearly an extremely pragmatic politician, and he won't care much about, you know, Macron's past stance on the whole issue. What he will be aiming to do is, you know, he will clearly see Macron as a wily technocrat who is extremely close to another Frenchman, Michel Barnier, the EU chief negotiator, and he will try to use Macron to revive talks, to revive the EU talks, basically. But, you know, this is an issue we talk a lot about in Britain and all the time, but I can assure you that this is not the case in France.
Part of me wonders whether, at this point, would it not be just better for citizens? I mean, forget the politicians. It's about all of us in the end, isn't it? It's not a political game. It's about what... Wouldn't it
Good
just be...
point.
Well, wouldn't it? But in a way, we forget that. It is about what's going to happen to all of us. You know, my mum needs medicine, somebody else needs insulin. What is actually going to happen?
Well,
wouldn't it be nice at this point for both sides to sit down and go, look, this looks like it's going to be impossible. Let's agree it's going to be no deal. And let's just... No, but what I mean is, in an honest way, at this point, wouldn't it be better for us all to know it's going to be no deal? Businesses can start actually knowing what's going to happen.
I think people are pretty much working it out now.
They are, but why
do
do we have... Do you know what I mean? Why play the game of looking like having nice meetings, coming to nothing, and then playing the blame game, which is what we're all predicting will happen?
Well, I think that's what Merkel was trying to say, was to answer your question, actually, yesterday. She was trying to say we still have a chance. You know, we still have a window of opportunity, not least to have a discussion about what our future relationship ends up being with the EU, because, of course, that's not in the withdrawal agreement. And what Europe is saying is, if we can get some clarity on that, what's the end point of this relationship, then maybe we can do a deal still, you know? So it's still, again, up to us to make our intentions clear.
Aren't we being a little bit simplistic in this country and around this debate generally in talking about crashing out with no deal? Because surely, if we do leave without a deal, we'll just end up doing a series of fragmentary deals. We'll do lots and lots of little deals, won't we? So in the end, we will end up with a package of agreements. They just won't be unified under a single banner of the agreement, the deal.
But with zero leverage in those negotiations and from a position of chaos. So, you know...
we don't know it's going to be chaos, Miranda. I mean...
Oh, I don't know. You and I remember the fuel protests and what happened to a government in charge of that. This blame game...
Excuse me, that was public panic. The reason in 2000 that the pumps went dry was because everybody was panicked by the propaganda.
But that could happen again.
Yes, because this government, even if we don't crash out, they're planning an advertising campaign to warn people of the potential consequences. People will be filling their cars,
part of the campaign will say,
tins.
we're not crashing out, the language that Remainers like Miranda used, we're going to leave with no deal, not crashing out. Because crashing out implies catastrophe.
Yeah.
But we were told that and I voted Remain, but we were told that the very act of voting to leave, if that's what happened, and it did, would mean the following day economic catastrophe in this country. Nothing happened. No earthquake, no lightning bolts. In fact, the pound strengthened.
And do you remember at Millennium, where the plane's going to fall out the sky at Millennium? Remember that?
No, but that's because lots of planning was done, so they avoided a catastrophe.
I disagree. Everybody No, that's nonsense. Everybody expected us to vote to stay in.
No, I'm talking about
and we were shocked.
The comparison with the Millennium Bug, if you want to actually talk about that. The reason there wasn't a catastrophe is because proper planning was done to prevent a catastrophe. So we need to do that.
I had my baked beans. I did. I did a little item on it.
Have you ever eaten the beans?
Pardon?
Have you ever eaten the beans? Are they still there?
They're still there.
They last forever.
You'll be all right.
I'll be all right.
Can we just end on this picture of a minister in New Zealand taking his baby in. Isn't he's a speaker?
Oh, that's the speaker, yeah.
Yeah, and he took his baby in and he's feeding
He's actually babysitting. So the speaker agreed to look after the baby.
Oh,
I think for one of the delegates who came
that
in with
lovely?
his... Yeah, really.
I think that is... Well, Andrew, are you sneering at this?
No,
Would
I
you
think it's very charming, but I just think if our speaker was to hold the baby would start screaming. John Bercow, he'd reduce the baby to a gibbering wreck.
I think it's a great image.
Lovely,
So
lovely
basically, an MP took the baby in and then needed to make a speech. So the speaker said, I'll take him.
Very charming.
And fed him.
Very
I think
charming.
It's very New Zealandy, isn't it?
It's very
Yes.
New Zealandy.
Yeah, yeah.
And also,
Lovely
they're
stuff.
so portable at that age that you can do loads of
Speakers
things.
or babies?
Jo Swinson did it, didn't she?
Yeah.
Jo Swinson did
you
it
can
as
do
well.
lots when the baby's tiny that actually you can't do when they're a toddler. So
Yeah,
I'm all
very
for
good.
it.
So just quickly to wrap it with you, all the way over from Paris, we're thinking that today will be polite in Paris. There'll be no harsh words, but there'll be no movement at all, and we'll see a definite division between what Merkel said yesterday and what Macron's going to say later today.
Yes, I think so, but I think there's also personality problem here. The view of the French is they very much see Boris Johnson as a, as a lively character, despite the insult he's aimed at the French very recently. And it's also, I have never, to be honest, seen a British politician, let alone a prime minister, being savaged as he is in France. One of the
Well, they call him a clown there, don't they?
One of the newspapers in France, such as Le Monde, they basically said he's not fit to be prime minister.
What do they
and
know
they
about
see him
it?
as a coarse chancellor with no eye for detail whatsoever. And
Well, they want to watch that. 'cause
They underestimate
whatever you
him
think
at
of
their
him, he is
peril.
our prime minister.
Yeah, and they underestimate him at their
As
peril.
the opposition does here too.
Thank you, all three of you. Lovely to see you. Right, time for the competition and your chance to win a life-changing £101,000. Joe Swash is here.
It's School Show here in Tenerife, and as usual, we've gone big, we've gone bold, and we've gone over the top to make your dreams come true. Yes, here's another chance to win our life-changing £101,000 in tax-free cash. So that means you can have over £8,000